So continuing on from the last video, we're now going to look at code coverage and continuous testing. So we've got our shopping cart lib and tests. The shopping cart isn't actually doing anything except returning an empty list. If we go to the tests, then that's all we're checking for at the moment. If I press Alt and F8 to get the testing pane up, then we explore this in the last section. We did mention that there's this concept of covering all tests. And if I click on this, then there's two things to note here. One is that we've got these bars in the gutter pane. If we go to our code, we can see we've got it here as well. So what that means is that the tooling has detected that there's tests covering this code. And because it's green, it's passing. Another thing which you might get, which I've turned off, which I'll show you in a sec, is over here, there's this test coverage. So we've got a pane here. So by I've turned it off, I mean, you might have had this pop up immediately. If we go to settings here, and I think it's in the root of .cover, then there's this option here. I think this is the default. I actually don't like this popping up, so I've turned it off. But if you're following along and you run that cover, it's possible that this popped up as well. So here is showing your project, and we can see we've got 100% test coverage. Obviously, there's not much to the code, so that's quite easy to do in this case. So if I add a new method, say private void blah, and remember Control-Shift-Enter, kind of completes that line and intelligently adds braces. So Control-Shift and Enter, that's quite a useful keyboard shortcut to remember. And then just do something like console.writeLine, let's do that. So it's worth pointing out that we've got this bar here, which is quite confusing. That's not related to these bars which we're talking about here. This left-hand bar is related to Git, because these are new changes since I last committed. If we hover over here, we get this pop-up, which I didn't actually mention in the Git video, but you can do this inline commit just this change as well. And you do get some kind of gutter highlights to indicate what's new, what's been changed, what's been deleted. But for this video, it's the bars to the right of the line number that we're interested in. So if I do cover again, then we can see that these have changed. And over here, we're not on 100% code coverage anymore. We can see here we've got grey lines. So grey lines means that this code isn't covered at all by tests. There's no tests that run this code. So at a glance, we can see which parts of our code aren't protected by tests. If I delete this now and save it, then it hasn't updated this. If I go to the settings and then go to continuous testing, then there's this option at the top saying whether to trigger it on build, save, or you can even configure your own shortcut. If I tick save, so I think the default's just build, and then I save now, and then I go down to this button here, append test to continuous testing session, and then I save, then we can see it's immediately updated this. It's run the test again and it's updated this. So just revisiting that, we've got this button, continuous testing is on. I can right click on a test and say, well, we've got these options here, which are grayed out now because this test is already part of the session, but we can set the selected test to continuous testing, or we can append it to the existing one. But basically any tests that are down as continuous testing, as we code, so if we go actually to our test now, let's just collapse this. And let's say, oh no, let's go back to the actual main code and return something else and save. So we can see that's run straight away. I didn't have to run those tests. And we can see that the test has failed. We can see we've got some red in the gutter. If we go over to the tests, we can see we've got red here as well. If I was to update the test to match, let's just copy this and go in here and save. Then as soon as I saved, that's rerun the test, and now we've got some green. And again, we can go back into the shopping cart and we can see green here. So quickly, before we start adding more methods, I'm going to go back to the settings, so Control Alt and S. So we're on build execution deployment .cover. So that's where we were looking when we were looking at the settings a few minutes ago. So we looked at this bit, and .cover, we looked at this bit. So .cover is actually a separate JetBrains product, and it's a standalone desktop application. I believe, if I remember correctly, some of this functionality in Rider required that to be installed. But before recording this video, I wanted to double check whether that was still the case. So I've actually uninstalled .cover from my machine, and it still seems to be working. So it looks like this is now built in. Maybe that's always been the case, and at some point I've just dreamt the fact that you needed .cover installed, but now it looks like that's not the case. But just in case you're wondering what this term .cover is, that's what that refers to. So if I close that, so I've got continuous testing on. I've turned it on for all the tests, and you can see it's actually created a tab called continuous testing. And actually, I take back what I said before when I said this was grayed out because it was already added to the session. It would actually be this is grayed out because I'm in the continuous testing tab. But if I go over to here and right click, then they're not grayed out. So we can set that as the continuous testing session, or we can append it to that session. So click here and see what's in this continuous testing session. This UI has actually changed fairly recently. So if yours looks different, just make sure you've got the latest version. So let's smooth that down a little bit, and I'm going to create a new test. Let's do fact. And let's say add our product. Control Shift Enter to do that. In fact, let's fix up this one because I did this just to demo something before, didn't I? So if I delete that and go back to here, we can see that's actually running automatically without me doing anything. And I'm going to delete that. And as soon as I save, it's doing this because we're in a continuous testing session. So back to our tests. If I say var sort equals new shopping cart, and sort being system under test, set dot, and let's say we want add. Let's just do add and Docker course. Let's say our product is my Docker course, which is also on Dome Train. So first of all, we need to get this to compile. So I'm going to do our favorite alt enter and say create method. So that's added it to our shopping cart. I'm just going to tab through this and say product. Let's just call that product. And then back. And we can see already, because we've got continuous testing, we've got some red here. So I'm not even having to think about these tests. I'm just writing the code and it's doing it for me. So then I actually want to assert for something. So it's failing because add will be throwing a, if I control click, not implemented exception. But let me copy this line here. And I'm going to bob that down here. And a get should be equivalent to Docker course. So I'm now happy with this test, but it's failing. So we need to make it pass. So control click shopping cart. We need to implement this now. So at this point, we kind of need to, we've got an add and a get, which have been called by the same test. We need to have some kind of persistent storage, and that can just be a local field. So for now, if we just say private list of string, and let's say items, in fact, we can new it up here as well. And ReSharper is telling me that I can alt and enter and use a new syntax. And again, another suggestion, alt enter, use collection expression. So that's a lot cleaner. And over here, we want to say items.add product. And we can get rid of this and save. And it's still failing. And we can see that we're hard coding what it's returning. So let's change that to items and then control S for save. And now we're green. Got a suggestion here, some green. So let's do alt enter, make it read only. Yep, we'll have that. And we can see we've got lots of green. We've got green where our tests are passing, where we've not even explicitly run them. It's been run for us. And we've got some green up here. The right-hand green, which was spoken about earlier in this course, shows that we've dealt with all the warnings and suggestions and things. And we've also got this that says that our code has been covered. So lots of green, which is always good. So that covers most of the things you need to know about testing. A lot of it is quite self-explanatory, where if you click on something, it explains what it's going to do. Again, we're going to cover profiling in a different module. So that now marks the end of this module. In the next module, we're going to look at how to deal with dependencies. And we've already touched a little bit on referencing other projects and adding a NuGet package, but we'll delve more into that, and also the tooling that Rider has to help you manage your dependencies, especially when you've got a very large code base.